Mm.
But you deal with this kind of, therapy, let's say. You are someone who works with people on their anxiety, and why don't you kind of help me understand, what it is you do?
Yeah, so I have a couple of different hats that I wear. So by trade, I'm a rehabilitation psychologist, and so basically that just means it's different, a little different than counseling psychology because I work directly with individuals with disabilities. So I've been doing that for over 20 years, where it's just helping integrate people have, regardless of ability, that society treats people as whole complete human beings. And so it's really remarkable work. But on top of that, where my passion is now more is obviously, I do yoga and meditation training and things like that, but I'm also a coach with a presence-based mindset. So sort of I guess it's more somatic experiencing, like what is happening within the body. Like, for example, for you, you had a tipping point where your body was just telling you loudly, something needs to shift right now. Your life is precious. What are you going to do? Right. And so the coaching piece of it is something that is where I'm spending a lot more of my time working with people that have anxiety or depression or I mean, this whole COVID pandemic and everything that's happened in the United States, within our Black communities and things like that has created a lot of fragmentation for people. And there's this separation of not being in this shared human experience anymore. There's this us and them, and this um, really, I don't even know how to say it, but it's created an energy that makes us more cautious of each other and makes us more afraid of human relationship and intimacy and connection. And without that, anxiety increases, depression increases because we're not having that supportive network in the same way, or that real intimate connection, or even like skin hunger, right? That's a thing, just touch. um, and so the presence-based coaching part of what I do is really focusing on how we can be in our felt sense into our own experience that we're feeling within our bodies to make change. Um, there's a lot of self-help books out there. There's a lot of, therapeutic approaches. And what I've found that's really helpful is what my body is telling me. And bodies are really intelligent. They're very, very smart. And our
Can you
minds can spin stories, but our bodies
can
tell
you
the
help
truth.
me understand, like, what somatic means in that sense then? Because I'm not very familiar with what this means. So, can you, because I'm very interested by what you just said about feeling your body and your intuition and just trusting yourself that you know what you need, what you want. I think we really do need a lot more of that because we're so messed up in our minds that we've disconnected, right, from our intuition and our inner guide, and we're trusting more this kind of tool that we have, our brain, when in reality, a lot of the decision making, I think, ancestrally just came from an inner knowledge and inner wisdom.
Yeah, well said. I think that's really part of it is the somatic. Soma is the body. That's what soma means. And so it's really trusting into that knowledge that we all have. Like we have this ancestral history, and we have this um, ancestral experiencing that is sort of a knowing or an intuition, like you said, that just comes up for us. And for some people, because they're living in fight or flight or in survival mode, they're not able to, because of the circumstances of their life, maybe drop into experiencing or exploring that so much. So I definitely think, for a lot of the folks that I've talked to, those that are really seeking um, to do that work around their body, or a trauma that they've experienced or something like that, may have more resources or more time to be able to commit to doing it. But it's really something that's not so complicated. I mean, in any moment you can check in with the felt sense of your body and see what's there. Do I feel fear? Do I feel tightness? Do I feel heat? Do I feel anxiety? Is this something I need to pay attention to? Or do I just sense into this for a bit and watch it pass? You know, we live in a very cognitive based world where everything is heady and thinking and doing. But that space of just being in the body and just sensing into what shows up, I think is really important for healing as a culture and healing as an individual. Um, the mind, I have this quote that I've said a lot that I think, I don't know where I heard it from, but that the mind or the thoughts are great teachers, but they're not good masters. So we often are like, oh, yeah, this is true. This is real because this is what we're thinking. Um, the body doesn't really have the creativity to lie. So you can talk yourself anything, but your body's gonna tell you, "I don't feel safe," or "I do feel safe," or, "This feels good to me," or "This doesn't feel good to me." And so I feel like that's the work of, like, I could do counseling and do therapy, and let's come up with behavioral, ideas or different, intention setting practices, which are all really good. But if your body isn't following suit, and the body and the mind and the spirit, like, aren't all connected, it may or may not be sustainable. So, what I found in my own life, because of my own experience with anxiety and trauma in my childhood, um, was that's what really helped me, of just that sort of dropping into my body, into a place of really being present with what is happening right now, so I could just really wake up to my life. And that, I feel like, has saved me personally, and something that I enjoy working with others to try and help them navigate their own path that way too.
Yeah, look, you've just mentioned a lot of stuff, and I want to touch on a few things that you mentioned. So, first thing I want to talk about is the lie. And you said that your body isn't good at lying to yourself because it's not built that way. You're supposed to feel what you feel and use it as a message, as an indicator of what to do next or what not to do next. It's your that's just the way you are. So I am in the same frame of mind, and I feel like we are taught all these things to believe, and we end up believing them, but our body's telling us something else. So let's say, let's go to the political debate right now, the political stage, just for a moment, and say Democrats are, uh, you know, better than Republicans for whatever reason. Let's just say that that's what's being mentioned and that's the narrative, and you end up believing that. And so when you come across a Republican, you just see a human being, but your mind is saying, I can't trust this person because they're not, they don't believe in the things I believe in. And so they're, inferior, or they're just not good people. That's a lie. And your body doesn't want to feel that or act that way, but you're forcing yourself to because your brain's rewiring your decision making process. And I remember listening to Dave Chappelle, the comedian. I love Dave Chappelle. He's amazing. But he's very philosophical, and he's very in touch with, the way the world works and how human beings are. And he said something to Joe Rogan. He said that he thinks that politics is just bullshit right now, right? Like a lot of us do. And he thinks that humans don't even want to be like this with each other. We're just doing it because we've been lied to. We've been told that we're not, the same, and we shouldn't be able to get along with each other. And he believes that if we just operate from a place of kindness and compassion, we'll be able to get along. That's what communities have done ever since the beginning of, however long it's been since we've been having communities. And like we just don't naturally want to fight. We want to be friends. We want to have relationships. That's a healthy community. So it's so sad to watch right now the community really disintegrate. And I wanted to ask you what you think about community, and how far you think we are from having community, and what that
Um,
means to you.
that's a really great question. I think often about well, I've been told before by some people that I'm like middle path. Like I can always kind of see both perspectives and kind of, and I don't know if I can see and understand. I care to listen to both. Like, oh, what makes this person think the way they think based on the conditioning of their life and their experience and their knowledge. And so it's hard to be judgmental unless somebody's just outright violent and harmful, right? But I feel like what's happened is people don't trust themselves anymore. We don't trust our own knowing and our own intuitive way of moving through the world. And so people are just clinging to anyone that claims authority, anyone who claims to know the answer. And, oh, yeah, that must be true because they seem certain, and I doubt my own knowing, so I'm just gonna jump on that ship and just, like, float around with this guy for a while. So I see that happening, and that's what's creating the fragmentation is there's a lot of, like, "Oh, it's this greed and this power and this, like, white supremacy," and yeah, all those things are true, and there's also a deeper human suffering that we don't trust ourselves, that if we really trusted ourselves as individuals and really dropped into our own knowing, we'd be able to question those people that claim to know what's best for us and do it without having to fight about it and do it in a way that offered space for every unique voice to be heard and celebrated. So community, I mean, just like this whole pandemic, I mean, oh my God. I mean, how did this become political about wearing masks? Or how did this become political about whether a human being who's of color is worthy or not worthy? Like everything is just, oh my God. I mean, it's just been really intense and sad to witness and experience. And also sadly not surprising because of how wired we are as humans to follow somebody that's like leading or someone that seems to know something more than us. There's a deeper ache there that we need to kind of take care of ourselves a little bit better. And then we can community really wholeheartedly and we can really serve each other better.
Mhm.
That
Ironically, because we were talking about the TV earlier, like, how it's not healthy to watch too much television. I think a lot of that agency of humans being able to trust themselves and take action and make decisions for themselves has been taken away over time by the messaging over television of you need this to be complete, you need to watch the news to know what's going on and what you should and shouldn't do. And so I feel like coming back to the full circle to the television subject, if we do spend less time consuming traditional media and even social media now, I feel like we're a lot more inclined to solve our challenges by ourselves as they come up in our lives. At least that's what happened with me. And I think a lot of the people that I've talked to who have taken like hiatuses from social media or television or any of the kind of, you know, vices that there are out there to just distract yourself. I think that that's what can really help people get agency back so that they can do,
Yeah, well said.
more of the things that, they actually truly need to
Mhm.
do. Yeah.
Yeah, I agree with that. I had a teacher that I studied with for a long time who passed away a few years ago. And he used to say, when there's a lot of fragmentation, he was big into social change and trying to make the world better. And he would often say, like, if there's somebody that you disagree with, just picture them as a child and just see them as just another person who is also struggling with trying to figure out how to move through this world and trying to find that piece of compassion. So, like Dave Chappelle talking about kindness, absolutely. It's also good to have boundaries, and all those things. But and another thing he would say is that when you look at another person or a person that walks past you, show them your face. Like, show them your face. Like, we are humans. We're in this together, and it's not always freaking easy. And so, like, just like look in their eyes and see another person who's just trying to figure things out. Um, we focus so much on our preferences, what we like and what we don't like about a person, rather than just the shared humanity that we have.
See, that's what I liked about growing up without the internet is that you'd have to go and you'd have to spend time with other people. And whether you liked them or not, you had to find a way to deal with them because there was no other way. Like you go to school, you go in a classroom, now everything's online, whatever. You go to a party, you see the people you don't like, you still have to say hi, you still have to come like it, you go to a store to buy something because there's no Amazon back then and you have to deal with the terrible customer service and all of that stuff. So it's like there's no it teaches you compassion. It teaches you patience. It teaches you
Patience, yeah,
communication skills.
right. And that
And
it's and that everybody's different um, it's not just about you. It's not just about me. It's not just about what I want. It's like, well, we have to learn to compromise to some degree, and we also need to learn to listen. And what we assume may not be correct, right? So it's like, how can we just have open hearts, open minds? Um, of course, like I said, boundaries. I'm saying that again because I do think sometimes we can be all like, "Oh my gosh, love and kindness," and yeah, it's like sometimes there's people that are really harmful, and it's important to feel in your body when you're sensing a feeling of not being safe and take care of that need, right? I mean, otherwise we're just, shared humanity is important, but also self-preservation is as well.
do you find that a lot of the people that you treat, and I want to talk about this now with you, like, what kind of people you work with, and do you feel like a lot of people that you work with have these emotional, mental challenges, let's say, because they have maybe not worked on certain social aspects of their lives. Let's say, for example, someone with high anxiety, maybe they haven't really spent enough time in situations where they could become strong and comfortable with being themselves because they know that nothing bad's going to happen to them. They're going to be fine. What are your thoughts about that?
No, that's a good question. I think it's a really is variable. I think there are some individuals that just have some cognitive imbalance, and they just have some mental health challenges that are maybe genetic. They're predisposed to some sort of trauma, something like that, and that requires like a different level of care. I do find that a lot of the folks that I work with, so in my real job hat, it's folks with disabilities, and that's a very different situation. A lot of that is more um, uh, disability related or diagnosed, right? And then other folks that I work with in my coaching are maybe not be have been diagnosed with depression, anxiety, things like that, but it's a symptom of a trauma or developing a habit nature at a very young age to protect themselves in some environment that they were in. And then that's just manifested into some level of anxiety or not feeling safe, um, or, feeling like, screw the world. I don't trust people. I'm just going to drink and I'm going to just tune out because it's too painful to be part of it. Um, there's that too. That's a self-protective mechanism, right? That like, it can protect people to a certain degree until it no longer does. So, but anxiety is a really good liar as well. I mean, anxiety tells you in some ways, it tells you that you need to be afraid as like your your starting point. And it doesn't always allow for discretion in the moment, right? Because it's like sometimes you do need to have fear, and sometimes that anxiety is important. Fear can be a really positive manifester of change. But I think a lot of times people have, including myself, like my own story, like it's having anxiety that kind of crept up as a result of habits that I've developed to protect myself, and just sort of working with that habit nature is a lot of what I do with coaching, of just saying, what is true for you right now? Where do you want to be in your life? And like, what are you committed to? And let's like really kind of break down um, some of these stories you're telling yourself so that you can build up the reality that you want for yourself. And so that's a little different, like in the coaching world. I mean, it's anxiety might be more of a manifestation of a story or a narrative that's been going on for a long time rather than that's really happening right in the moment, right?
Do
So
you have like a personal experience with anxiety? Is that why you kind of like gravitated toward doing that kind of coaching?
yeah, I mean, for me, I didn't acknowledge anxiety as something that I experienced until I was in my 30s. um I certainly had a lot of like looking at like a trauma spectrum, like if you write down from like the moment you're born all the way through like all of your trauma moments, like an average it's like 10 or 11 big events for a person or something. I have like 50, so I was like, oh my God, all these things. Like, no wonder why I choose to be alone a lot of the time because I feel safe by myself. Trust myself. And so, I would look at that kind of pattern. But then when my life got so busy and I was parenting and I'm wifing, I'm a wife, I'm a mom, I'm working, I'm doing all these things. And there was a lot of othering that was happening. I kind of lost myself in that and needed to depend on other people, which was really terrifying for me. And
So you
anxiety
went from, like, one end of the spectrum to the other kind of thing.
and anxiety just kicked my ass. So it was I had probably several years of some pretty significant anxiety, which I didn't actually talk to most people about. I kept it very private, and it was a very lonely journey.
What kind of
But that
symptoms did you have?
oh God, that's a great question. For me, it was a lot of aversion about being with other people. I like something as simple of going to meetings with like clients. I was wanting to sit as close as I could to the door so I could leave as soon as I needed to. Um, I was facial. I was having like facial tics. I was having weird symptoms that way. I wasn't able to eat very well. Um, the like panic attacks probably like every 2 3 days where my whole body was having this big huge somatic experience where I felt like I was being chased by a tiger or something. It was horrible, just horrible. And I didn't and I would just keep it in so no one around me could tell that that was happening to me, but I'd be experiencing I know. I mean, I had to be a mom. I was a wife to somebody, he knew about it, but it was a little challenging for him because I'm used to like he's used to me kind of having my stuff together, right? So I didn't quite have my stuff together. I was there was a voice that was very loud in my mind where I remember saying, "All right, like this I would rather be depressed than anxious." I'm not sure that's the truth for most people, but for me that's that I would rather because with the depression is sort of an apathy and it just like I don't give a shit. And with anxiety, it was so ever present. It was so crippling. It affected my ability to travel, to enjoy my life fully because I was just having this big anxious bubble. Like, is this it? Is this my life?
Where did it come from, if you don't mind me asking? Like, did you f yeah, I assume you figured it out and that's how you kinda
Yeah,
resolved
yeah.
it.
I mean, part of it was, a childhood trauma that I never really, like, metabolized, if I could if that's the right word. I just kind of was in it, one thing after another, after another, after another, and then things sort of settled, and there was a big truth that happened in my family, and when that happened, I didn't quite know where my role was within the family. Um and I was adopted, and so I think there's some nucleus back to that of, like, not knowing where I belong, sort of feeling like totally an island and just this sort of loner in the world, and I used to enjoy that part of my identity of feeling that way, and then it got to the point where I really needed support around me to kind of work through some things, and I was giving a lot of energy out and not really taking good care of myself.
Mhm. So
Um,
you're kinda, like, neglecting what was happening within you.
and
Yeah.
just, giving myself the permission to feel what I really was feeling without hearing others around me tell me that I should not feel that way. Like, I always had this pattern of feeling guilty when I would ask for things for myself. It was a deep conditioning in my childhood, and so then when I needed to ask for things for myself, I didn't know how. So it just built up and built up and built up over the years until I was like, "Holy crap." Like, this is one human body and one mind, and I'm carrying all this, and I don't know how to release it because um, I don't have practice doing it. So it kind of took over, and that's where meditation practice really helped me. That's where I dropped into that because
Right.
that my life. It really did.
What kind of meditation did you practice?
Did and still do more just Zen style meditation. Just sit down, see what happens. Wake up to this moment in your life. Um, nothing, not more of a secular style of practice. My main teacher at the time was Buddhist primarily, and a lot of my dear friends also practice Buddhism as a kind of a way of moving through the world. And I love Buddhist psychology and I love Buddhist thought, and I think that coupled with sort of my spiritual childhood background, I was raised Christian. I was raised in a little Methodist church in the woods, and while I have lots of opinions about the Christian church, and kind of what's happened with the Christian church. I definitely found a lot of value in some of the teachings that I learned, and especially in service. So I think that sort of service heart energy, as well as just really looking at the psychology of the mind and how it works, helped me to center and helped me to sort of find that balance within myself, what I can
Mm.
control, can't control, how the mind is
Right.
just
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. So the whole thing about the church is interesting because I feel like I understand what you're saying. I have a very religious family. You know, my close family is religious. My sister has just graduated Bible college in California. My mother is just about to graduate her second year of pastor training, and my father is kind of going along and helping her and being part of that. So, it's just myself and my brother who in the family are not religious. But when you said that there's a lot of things you learned with having a childhood that was in that background that helped you, like maybe some values and, principles, and I get that. And I picked up a Bible recently. I actually ordered 2 different Bibles because it's very hard to read the Bible, and
Yeah,
I'm not sure if people
especially
have actually
Deuteronomy.
tried to read it, but it's pretty
Yeah.
hard.
Yes.
And, so I bought a Bible that is a little bit more modernized.
Is it the
So,
message?
I can.
Yeah.
Yes, right?
Yeah.
You can find it. Now, it's funny for me to be talking about this because I am an agnostic person. I don't really believe in any particular God, even though I do feel quite spiritual. So, I had to give myself permission to actually say, I can read about the Bible and read into it and learn about it and not feel like I need to be Christian. But I recognize that there's something there. There's something in the teaching that is really powerful. And I think it's community building. I think it's what we're missing, maybe some of it is we've forgotten it, or, like, because I think in the United States, Christianity has always been a backbone of the United States, right? And now what I feel, and I might be wrong, I feel like we've taken our personal liberty and our personal freedoms to such a degree that we are so far left that we've kind of lost the concept of having more traditional values, which are actually conducive to having a functioning community where people have rules and regulations and they operate a certain way. And it's all to do with making sure that everyone gets along and we're able to live together without like killing each other. So, there's something there. I didn't mean to take it away that far, but
But I think it's relatable. I mean, when I think about, like, I have friends that joke with me. They say, I'm not into Jesus, but I like your version of Jesus. And so, like, I think Jesus was great. And I look at like the Christian church, and I think, what do you do? This is like not even at all what he was talking about. So, I mean, part of it is I grew up in like a small church where it was all about kindness and compassion and service. And I go to Tennessee and go to like the Appalachian Mountains and build houses for homeless people. I mean, it was like all service oriented stuff. And so that's where I felt like the presence of God, if that's what we're talking about. And but for me, mostly it's in nature. It's mostly in nature where I can trust that. People are really not such good reminders of of what God, quote unquote, is supposed to be. So yeah, I mean, it's interesting, and having that mindset. And I like what you were saying too, because so often people think, well, I don't believe in that, so I'm not going to read that. But part of what
that's
makes
it.
somebody an educated, thoughtful person is to be able to look at both perspectives and or look at
Mhm.
all perspectives and say,
And it's
interesting.
not just religion, it's
Yeah,
Republicans and Democrats, it's
right.
Black people and white people or,
Absolutely.
people of
Oh,
color. It's everything. It's the
right.
ability to open your mind to different ways of thinking and
Well,
still
my parents
maintain your agency.
absolutely, that's so true. My parents are, my mother and my stepfather anyway, are very, very strong conservatives, very strong Republicans, and they're also very strong Christians. And I remember just this last summer saying, "You do realize that Jesus wasn't a Republican, don't you?" I don't think he was a Republican. And she's like, I know. So I mean, it's interesting how I feel like predominantly like white men came and pulled out of a religious practice of Christianity the rules that benefited them to create a culture and a system politically that our country is built on. Because really, um, the principles that like Jesus was talking about are not very different than what Buddha was talking about or whatever, right? And so it's just our human need to feel control, and so pick and choose what I think works. We all do it. I mean, I do it, like, "Oh, this works for me, that doesn't." So so I like to say as well that I'm a very spiritual person, but I'm not a very religious person because I think that there's a lot of, uh just information that pulls away from someone trusting their own knowing or relationship with their spiritual practice if it's just written in a book like believe this, don't question it. It's like, well, yeah,
Yeah.
the questioning is part of where faith comes from.
Yeah.
The question
Yeah.
is important. Yeah,
Wow.
interesting.
It is fascinating, and I hope that more people I hope that people listening to this can or watching this can actually come to, give themselves permission to do things that maybe they don't identify with just because, they can, and it can open your mind to new ideas. Speaking of, what's happening today, how has this year changed for you in terms of like your clients and their needs, and how have you dealt with that, and what kind of situations have you seen happen, recurring, uh, that maybe people are suffering with today?
Well, other than just the sort of um, real life things of job loss or illness or losing a parent or something that they weren't able to be with. I mean, there's trauma around it. There's trauma around COVID. There's trauma around the fragmentation of our political system and our cultural system. um, but what I've found is like kind of a pattern. What I've seen is that those that tend to be in more helping professions have been the ones that I've seen the most that are more like psychiatrists or, nurses or because they're like, I can't help, I don't know how to help. And so a lot of the practice is like, what can you do? Like, how can you um, just return back to yourself for a minute and just gather yourself for a minute because there's a lot of unknowns and I feel like that unpredictability and sort of a lack of a like predictable rhythm of this is how things go because everything has just been uprooted.
So psychiatrists will come to you for guidance
Yeah,
on.
we're coaching, yeah.
Wow, that is fascinating and
Bec-
worrying, but fascinating.
well, I think every good therapist needs a therapist, right? I mean,
Yeah.
it's like
No, I'm joking. I'm half joking because 'cause we're all human,
yeah,
like,
we are all human. We are all human. That's true. But I feel like there's a like that, like, I've used the word fragmentation a bunch, but I really feel like that's what's happened. And so knowing where someone is in their own life and how they work in their community, there's a lot of questions around how to be with each other. And that's brought up a lot of interesting emotions for people. And I think that's one of the biggest things is anxiety more than anything. Anxiety and as a result of just this trauma. And maybe not even being aware, like maybe someone didn't lose their job and maybe their marriage is great and maybe their life is fine, but they're still anxious. So there's this undercurrent that's happening of anxiety in our human world that my working with people, it's more like, what does this mean for you? Like, what is this like for you? And give people permission to explore that within themselves. Yeah, the world might feel like a mess, but you have value. Let's talk about what you need. And so that's kind of been where a lot of the coaching has been. Um,
just talking, just getting
just
to the bottom of it.
talking because and I don't know if there is really a bottom of it. I feel like it's more of a just being able to explore like what they're feeling and give permission, because I think there's so m- myself included, it's hard for me to go, oh, but I'm feeling upset about this, or I'm feeling anxious or sad about this. But then I go, oh, well, but the world, so many people are suffering. So I'm just going to put myself aside because what's going on, in Israel right now, or what's going on in our Black communities, so like not giving myself permission to also have value, especially when there's so much suffering that's really present right now.
So, how would you describe that process then? Let's say someone's suffering from, chronic debilitating anxiety or panic attacks. How would you guide someone through that? And what does that normally look like for you with your patients or your clients?
Yeah, I mean, it's different for both hats that I wear. Like in the psychology hat, I usually have a team of people where we all work together to address something. And again, those are clients that have disabilities, and so they usually have guardians that kind of help manipulate some of the things. Um, and again, like anxiety, it's really looking at, is that anxiety something that is a mental health diagnosis? Is it actually something that requires more significant treatment or medication? Or, and I'm not pro medication, but I do think there's a place for it. Um, and so there may be that's like a little different, I think, than a lot of the folks that I'm seeing now might not have like an actual diagnosis of anxiety or depression or that sort of dissociation that's been happening a lot with people. So in like the coaching end of it, if somebody comes to me and I'm wearing my coaching hat and they're saying like I'm having ongoing panic attacks and I can't sleep and there's other things going on, I might actually refer them back to their doctor and say, let's build a team to support you and see if there's other things, or a psychiatrist or somebody else that can be on the team, or better supporting that person. Um, because there is a time for those kind of referrals. And I try to keep both hats separate, like therapy hat and coach hat, kind of keeping them different because it's very hard for me to not blend the two. But for in the coaching world, with when people come and they have anxiety, I mean, I think the biggest thing is just giving people the space and the room to just name what they're feeling without any judgment from me. Just sharing their story. God, I mean, that's so important. People feel really isolated right now, and being able to share like what their experience is and where that anxiety comes from, and reflecting back the narrative that I'm hearing. That's another big piece of it. It's like, oh, so this is what I'm hearing you say. And half the time you're like, oh my God, that's not even what I mean. Oh, that's what I said. That's what I sound like. So it mirroring back sort of a reflective voice, I think, has been really helpful for people. And often just talking through the anxiety reduces the anxiety. I tell folks all the time, the more you talk about your anxiousness, the more you talk about your trauma or your experience, even if it's really, really freaking hard, the less power it's going to have over your agency, right? Over your person. Um, and so sometimes I'll have clients that will just tell me the same story until they can shift the narrative a bit and have a different perspective shift. Um, but usually in all of the sessions, we start with some grounding and some meditation. And we do some somatic work sometimes where we're actually doing physical practices together and not actually
What does
talking.
that look like, the somatic work? Because I'm very fascinated by that.
Yeah, it's very fascinating stuff. I mean, it's really different for each person, but um, in the coaching world, it's having the person have more accountability for their own life rather than me as a therapist saying, "Here's some suggestions." It's more like, what would be helpful here? What would be important to you right now? What do you feel you need right now? And just kind of helping that person to learn to trust themselves again, um, and then try something, and then I hold them accountable. And then maybe it works, maybe it doesn't work. But if it's hard, one of the simplest things is if someone says something to me that this is what I feel, I might say, "Where do you feel that in your body? Where are you sensing that right now in your body?" Or I'm going to say this to this person. Well, how does that feel in your body? Let's try it. Let's practice it. Where do you feel it in your body? Let's try that. So it's more having them every time they're communicating sort of drop into, what's my body telling me right now about this? Do I believe my own bullshit, or like or is this really true for me, or actually I have a huge aversion to what I'm saying, or I feel really powerful about it, or also mirroring. Like, I notice when you say this, you move towards the camera or you're clenching your fist. Can you tell me about that? Or I notice this when you're not able to look at the camera when we're talking or in person or whatever, look in my eyes. So bringing up physical body language, how does that rest with you? How does it land with you? And just having them reflect on how they're presenting themselves. One of the most powerful somatic experiences that in my training that I did and that I also will do with folks is them finding a body shape that expresses how they want to feel. Like, how do you want to feel? What's your ideal experience? And have them show me, stand up, show me in their body what that feels like. And then, where are you right now? And have them with their body take shape as a way of expressing what that feels like. And then I'll have them watch me and I'll hold those poses, I'll mirror those poses for 3 minutes in silence and have them watch. This is what I look like right now. This is what it feels like. And often there's tears coming. They're like, holy crap, I look contracted. I look afraid. I look angry or whatever. And then they'll watch me do, this is where you want to be. This is what it looks like. How does that feel? So they can actually sort of have that mirrored back sensation. Um, it seems so simple, but boy, it can be really powerful stuff. Really cool,
Hmm.
actually. Yeah,
Yeah, that's,
lots of tears happen. So, it's really like, how do you feel that in your body? What does that look like? How do you sense into that? So those are some of the most basic kind of things. There's certainly other kind of deeper somatic work that we'll do, but, a lot of it is just returning back to that, like, "Okay, let's try this," and then have some self-observation. How does this feel in your body? Like, have them take notes, you know, this you had this exchange with this person you were avoiding or whatever, how did that feel in your body? Where did you feel it in your body? So it's a lot of that instead of just talk therapy. It's more
nice.
physical. Yeah.
I love that. I love the sound of that, and, oh, yeah, I think that we get a lot of inquiries about mental health counseling and help, and a lot of people that consume our content are always messaging us saying, I need I need someone to talk to. I'm feeling depressed. I feel like I want to take my own life. And I feel like this year, last year, it's really, we've really entered a new mental health epidemic, and we need to be doing everything we can to give people the tools they need to cope with this. You mentioned that you do a lot of yoga. That is a very complementary, right, therapy. What do you know works, and how often do you do that?
Oh god. I mean, I'm laughing only because, what works for one person might not work for someone else. And so for me, like having a yoga practice or meditation practice really is very, very important for me to maintain a sense of grounding. For someone else, it may be like Zumba dancing or, pole dancing or something else. I mean, whatever it might be. So I think it's really depends on where somebody feels that they can connect with a type of movement. So I mean, it really depends. But you mentioned a couple things. Like the first thing about like if somebody was to come to me and say, "Hey, I'm suicidal and I'm having suicidal ideations and I'm feeling like this," then coaching would not be an appropriate option for them. That would be more of a therapy kind of aspect. But if someone's like, "Hey, I'm stuck. I'm in a loop. I'm in a pattern. I can't get out of this pattern, or I have this anxiety that I just can't like get over it, or a fear that I just can't name." That's where coaching I think can be really helpful. And for some, it might be picking up some sort of yoga practice as a complementary um, movement exercise or a meditation practice or something like that. And for some, it might be that might just totally trigger anxiety. They might not want to be, maybe they want to do something else. Maybe they just want to break dance or something. So it really depends on the person. I try to be open with like what works for that individual rather than what works for me. So
Sure. Yeah, that makes
yeah,
sense.
yeah.
Um, no, I agree with you. And it's the same with meditation for me. Like I do a certain type of meditation, might not be the type that other people like. I actually like the idea of Kundalini, uh, the whole practice of that, but I've never tried it. I only ever do the kind of like, I'm gonna sit and be mindful, which works. But the Kundalini looks a lot more somehow invigorating in a sense, like,
Yes.
just the
You're
way
very
that it
fabulous, yeah. That's great. Yeah.
yeah, and I feel like I'm starting to open my mind to that more comprehensive type of practice, which is bit maybe more spiritual than just sitting with your focus on one thing. And so, yeah, I agree with you. I wasn't ready for meditation, a couple of years ago, but up until that point, I'd been doing things like, going to the gym or just taking a break and going to the beach. And like you said, for some people, that's probably a good place to start. Just take a break. I actually had a friend who was in a very high profile position for a big tech giant, and he was under pressure to perform um, against really aggressive goals, and he was drinking so much every day. And I was worried about him, and everyone was worried about him. And he went to the doctor, and the doctor said, "Look, you're going to die if you don't stop doing this. You're going to kill yourself." So he quit his job and he started doing diving, just scuba diving. And he said it really took all the stress away. Just being in the water, in the calm, peaceful, no noise, just beautiful things to look at, and you just
Fantastic.
find your groove. But
Yeah,
I
absolutely.
really, yeah,
Yeah, that's
yeah,
no, I agree.
I
Finding your groove, that's a nice way of putting it. Yeah.
sure. I think that hopefully when people listen to this and watch this, they'll get some interesting insights as to what drives, anxiety, what drives mental health challenges, how they can maybe, come to terms with that, give themselves permission, who they can go to see for help. Speaking of which, how do people get in touch with you? What's the best way? How do they find you?
Oh gosh. Well, at this point, we're in different countries. So if I say, "Hey, give me a jingle, give me a call." My email is usually best, and of course, we use WhatsApp. So if there's anybody that's in your world that's interested in coaching, they could certainly use that. But do you want me to like give you my email address?
Yeah, what's your email? What's your email and your WhatsApp? Because our main audience is in the US, so we
Oh,
most of the
okay, there
people
you
that
go.
listen to this are in your neck of the woods.
Yeah. So the email address is y massage letter y massage yoga. So y massage yoga at gmail.com. And so ymassageyoga at gmail.com is the best way to reach me. And then from there, it's figuring out, next steps, or if it's the right fit, or if they have questions, I'm happy to just answer questions as well. Or, refer out if there's some other, bigger needs that someone is working with that I can't help with. So really people are helping themselves. I'm just sort of guiding them through it. But
Maybe that's the best type of help they can get.
yeah, I mean, sometimes therapy is the right option. One of my very closest friend is a psychotherapist here in Madison and does amazing work. So, there's all sorts of options, and sometimes coaching is the right thing. Sometimes therapy is depends on the person. So yeah,
Nice. Thank you so much for coming on. I really appreciate it. It's been a really nice conversation.